I did my field experience first at Lakeview Junior High with Mr. Guerreri and then at Kilbourne Middle School with Mr. Alexis. The experiences were similar in some ways and different in others. Lakeview Junior High is in Pickerington, which is a suburb that is pretty nice. The band program is absolutely at the top and seems like it would be absolutely ideal to most band teachers. It's like the middle school band promised land. The students mostly have great technique and produce excellent individual tone qualities. They can afford school instruments and a full-time percussion instructor and even a repairman who comes in quite frequently. Their instrument storage looks extremely neat to me. The band room is pretty big, the office spaces are great, and it's overall a school with great facilities. The students, for the most part, respond very well to Mr. Guerreri, and there aren't many moments where serious disciplinary action needs to be taken. Usually students get a warning when something happens, and they pretty quickly realize that what they're doing is wrong. A pretty incredible thing to me is that there is never any time when Mr. G just loses the room. He has a pretty firm grip over the students' attention, and they usually seem very attentive. Students mostly come to class prepared and are expected to know their parts. Kilbourne Middle School is in Kilbourne, which is a small township in Worthington. This experience was quite different from Lakeview. The first thing I noticed was that the building was much smaller and older. The bands were a little bit smaller, and their schedules were very strange. There were a lot more disciplinary issues and students wandering around the room. Students were constantly missing music, even days before the concert for who knows what reason. The room was much smaller, and organization of the room was much more wild. Music was often in the wrong place, probably because the stacks of music were constantly being gone through by the students who lost their music. I noticed that Mr. Alexis acted just about as silly as Mr. Guerreri. I also noticed that Mr. Alexis seemed to lose control of the band when they were rehearsing with the whole band instead of just individual sections. I don't know if I would necessarily attribute this to Mr. Alexis's teaching style. I think that this is because at Lakeview they had multiple student teachers running around and a full-time percussion instructor that was always watching the percussion section from the back. Students don't have their parts down as much as Lakeview did. I think that once again this can be attributed to Kilbourne not having as much extra help. Mr. Alexis shared his viewpoint on doing practice journals or logs. He said, "There are already so many reasons to quit band, you're better off not giving them another reason." In Deborah G. Gordon's article on classroom management, she outlines 3 points that make music classroom management different from other classroom management. First, music classrooms require a group effort rather than the individual efforts of many learners. Second, the number of music classrooms are often much larger. Lastly, the outcome of the class effort is typically displayed through concerts, contests, etc. that place additional pressure on the music educator to maximize classroom instructional time. It's almost as if these concepts echo throughout Mr. Guerreri's mind while he is teaching. I want to say that there is almost a sense of urgency in his teaching, but I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. I don't mean that he is panicked, I mean that he moves very quickly on a set schedule from one thing to another, and he clearly has a routine for each day. The plan for the day is always up on the board and gets much more specific than most music classrooms I've seen. And whenever he cuts the band off, he immediately moves on to the next thing. He understands the pressure of a music classroom and actively responds to it. Finally, I would like to talk about something that I feel that Mr. Guerreri and Mr. Alexis are let me say that again. Finally, I would like to talk about something that makes me feel that Mr. Guerreri and Mr. Alexis are very similar teachers despite their differences. They're both silly teachers. They make really funny comparisons and act very goofy often. I never quite realized the effectiveness of this because I always thought of it like, no, music is supposed to be serious, no fun. But of course music is supposed to be fun. I've heard this constantly disapproved of, but it's very effective. The silly comparisons they make really resonate with their students and help them get to play the music in exactly the way that the comparison is intended to go for. So not only does it keep the attention of the students, it is also an effective way to make sure the students understand the musical concepts. I feel like I got a lot out of field experience. Getting to be up in front of students is what really makes me feel like I am progressing as a teacher. I feel like making mistakes and learning from it is one of the best ways to get good at something, and that's exactly what I feel like I'm doing. Watching Mr. A and Mr. G really changed my perspective on what goes into a music classroom, and I'm sure that I'll be able to use what I've learned in the future.